if you're watching this after the fact, the recorded video, you could be another day, another year, even years into the future, like a time capsule where you're hearing this message. So for you in this very moment, this is live and in person because it's what you take from it. So obviously we're going to be talking about non-duality. That is what this channel has been focused on. And as we go along here, this is going to be a little bit of a shorter live talk, but if you have any questions or comments, feel free to type it in the chat there, and I'll see if I can get to it. So, non-duality, if you look at the word itself, it means not to, obviously, but it doesn't mean anything if you're not interested in the topic or if you don't have a deeper understanding of what it's really pointing to. One of the ideas I had was to put together a short video without me on camera, maybe a video of like a time lapse of a river or the wind blowing through trees or something, and just my voice doing a talk above the visual. So I started to write basically an intro into non-duality, because I've my first video, The Best Method, has the most views of any of my videos, and I think that's because that's what people are looking for. But I wanted to do an intro video that kind of lays it out. I have other videos you can check out on my channel that really tries to, in a nutshell, get to what the essence of non-duality is trying to get at. But I wanted to put together an intro video where it kind of takes me a little bit more out of the picture, so then people can kind of delve into non-duality, and not project onto onto the messenger, the speaker, aka this guy, whatever they feel or think about the presentation. So it would be more of a polished, recorded vocal of something that I would write down. And so I got a start to that. Part of me feels like maybe I will or maybe I won't make that video, because part of this whole process of non-duality is that it always happens in this very moment, and it's always unfolding. There's never a conclusion, in a sense, to it. So the creation of meaning that we get through any sort of personal understanding of this topic is always evolving, if you will, evolving in the absolute stillness of nothingness, if you will. And so that's where we're at. And so a part of me doesn't really want to put a package bow on an intro for people that are new to this topic. So I do have other videos you can check out if you're interested, but I will read the start. So, most of the time you want to put together something that's packaged, that's complete, that makes sense. But I'm just going to give you the rough draft version, and maybe this is all you're ever going to get. So I'll start. Non-duality simply means not to. But what is it referring to? The only way to speak about non-duality is through dialogue, which implies a sender and receiver of the message. Since discussing non-duality is done conceptually through language, its meaning can never be fully grasped using the intellect, because objective knowledge is dualistic by nature. That sounds a little bit of a hefty word salad, but I'll read it one more time. Non-duality simply means not to. But what is it referring to? The only way to speak about non-duality is through dialogue, which implies a sender and a receiver of the message. Discussing non-duality is done conceptually through language. Its meaning can never be fully grasped using the intellect, because objective knowledge is dualistic by nature. So what we understand, what we know through any sort of epiphany or awakening, an understanding of our relation to the world, is always, in a sense, something that we have, that we understand, that we grasp. We grasp knowledge. We hold on to knowledge of a world that seems to be out there, a self-object relationship, and that's kind of the understanding of the 3D world, of the objective reality that we live in. So that's where a lot of people are coming to this topic to grasp something, to learn, to grow, to evolve into some um, uh, sense, state of awareness, state of being that is somehow um, different than the current state, if you will. But with non duality, it's all the same. Nothing ever really changes because non-duality is really a descriptive way of looking at the world, not necessarily telling you what to do or what you need to become or what you need to think or believe. It's more of just a description of the non-dual nature of reality and the nature of the mind creating dualism by trying to seek knowledge, by creating meaning of the world around us. We create that dualism, and then we seek to try to fix that separation. It's kind of the old mythology of the ancient mythology of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, and being tempted by the serpent to eat the fruit of knowledge from the tree of knowledge, and therefore they're aware of their existence, their existential reality, their nakedness, and then they feel guilt and shame through that decision. So it's kind of this way of becoming human in a sense of abstractly seeing ourselves as separate from God or separate from nature, however you want to describe it, separate from the kingdom. And it's finding the journey, the path, the way back to that connection, to remove the apparent separation, to find the enlightenment of what is. So that's what maybe you're seeking as you come to my channel, as you come to this live talk. If you're watching this video after the fact, that's maybe what you're looking for on some level. But I think non-duality, as I've mentioned in other videos, acts as a mirror. So whatever it is you're thinking about the topic, or what you're seeking, what you're looking for, what you're trying to find, that can be a cue, that can be a reference point to start with, to start questioning why it is, or why you're thinking this way, or why you're behaving in this way, why you think that this Russ Rapp character is something to agree with, or someone to make fun of or criticize. But ultimately, what's happening in this very moment, or seems to be appearing, is this body, this vessel of spirit, if you will, that I identify as myself, Russ Rapp, is sitting in a chair in a room at some little tables, and I am looking into this little camera here, and that is my reality. I'm essentially talking to an empty room, but through technology, this can be relayed over to you and your uh, viewing pleasure, if you will. So that's what's happening in the moment. Maybe you're watching this after the fact and you're doing whatever you're doing. You're maybe listening to this on your phone, or you have earphones in, or you've got it on the TV. However you're viewing this, that is your experience. That's what you're taking away. And in that moment, in this moment in time, the meaning that you take from this may be different than 20 years from now, or maybe it would have been different than if you would have heard this message 10 years ago. Maybe you wouldn't have connected at the time, but there's some reason that you're watching this video or watching this live talk right now as I'm giving it, or as you're receiving it. So ask yourself why. That's always a great question to start with. And the other great question to ask yourself is, who am I? You're the sound of one hand clapping, I guess. So that's non-duality for you. Let's see. And the other thing I wanted to mention in this video, because like I said, I'm going to keep it a little bit shorter, um, is I think a lot of times people hear this message, or they see people relay this message in a way that they think that they have to act a certain way, or be a certain way, or believe a certain thing. And there's this idea of the stillness, the inner peace of knowing that this illusion of separation is unreal. And so there's this idea that since I subscribe to that belief in a way that I have to let things flow. I have to be super chill and not get worked up, not get angry, not get depressed or sad or scared or anxious. Um, that I have to sit here and just stare off into space with an empty smile and just marveling at the creation that it just appears from moment to moment, how wonderfully magnanimous and glorious it is just to be alive in this aliveness, this uh, oneness of creation that we're all a part of, and we sit around a fire and sing kumbaya. And so I think there's a perception of that's what it should look like if somehow you um, hear this message and you subscribe to non-duality. That's your reality. And so when you have these negative emotions, what seem to be negative emotions, and it seems like you're failing or you're losing or you're missing something or you're missing the message, and ultimately the experience or the state of being has nothing really to do with non-duality, because it's not about your experience of it. But what can happen, I think, the reason why it can be confusing conceptually as we speak of non-duality is you can hear this message and maybe it clicks for you. Maybe you have this moment of epiphany or awakening where you realize that all the stuff you prioritize, all the stuff you put on a pedestal, you worried about, that you concern your life with, your worries, all that seems to kind of fade away or melt away because you realize it loses meaning, the lack of importance that kind of is happens in the moment. It all kind of drops away or fades away, however you want to describe it. And so then there is this sense of peace that maybe you didn't feel before, because now essentially life is oftentimes way more simple than we make it out to be. So we actually complicate our reality, our experience, through all this other stuff that we pile on. We have this, the layers of the onion of the personality of how we interact with life, all the walls, the masks that we put on and we put on in front of people, the feelings that we have, the kind of uh, we buy into, we identify with, that can affect how we see the world. So we see the world through, rose-colored glasses, or glass half empty, glass half full. However we interpret life, that can make it seem a lot more of a struggle, a lot more pain. So people hear this message and they're like, okay, it's the end of suffering, it's the end of pain. And on some level it is, and another level it's, you still have to walk through the darkness to see the light. There's still going to be struggle. You may actually have more of difficulties as you face your shadow, as you lose your illusions, as you come to the point of waking up to your own BS, if you will. And that could be a struggle, that could be painful. And so this idea that it's going to be rainbows and bunnies from here on out is kind of a misnomer, because it's an interpretation of the message of non-duality. Non-duality is simply this: it is what is. It has nothing to do with your experience or the state, and yet your state or experience may change, or maybe it doesn't change. But the carrot, the stick, and the carrot are always the same seeking mechanism that we seek for other things in life, whether it's money or fame or relationships or sex or um, any sort of things that we maybe desire out of life, or you know anything, essentially anything that we witness or can grab onto in life. We can covet those things, we can idolize those things, and that becomes the thing in itself that we cherish, that we worship. And that's where the struggle becomes, that it's still that seeking mechanism of, I don't have, there's a lack, and therefore I need to consume that, I need to have that, I need to have power over that. So there's a sense of control or lack thereof that comes into play. So all that essentially is looking at the world and believing that it's real, or fully ultimately real, and disregarding kind of that which cannot be seen, or um, God, or the will of God. And so we negate everything as something that is just a fable or a myth or something not to be believed, and yet we believe that, in a sense, is its own belief that we hold on to dearly. And so the belief often becomes a belief in ourselves, a belief in our sentient, long-lasting, everlasting self that we want to, prop up and live forever. And so that becomes the drive, because as we see ourselves as alive, as we are birthed, we see ourselves as dying, or that death will come. And that's an inevitability. And so we want to try to avoid that, or triumph over death, essentially. So it's just been a whirlwind here. I hope we're getting close to the end. I'm going to try to wrap it up here in a minute. I don't see any chats here in this video, but if you do have comments after the fact, feel free. I like to check the comments every once in a while, and if I can, respond back to them. So that's something I enjoy to do. Whether or not I make another video or do another live chat in the future, who knows? Who is a very wise person? So, all right. So we're going to finish here with a verse from the Bible, the Holy Bible, the Word of God. And so I want to say, as we finish up here, as we wrap things up, I want to thank you for joining me, and God bless. And I'm going to read from Proverbs chapter 1, verse 7. Proverbs chapter 1, verse 7. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and discipline.